Hello and welcome to another edition of the Heron Outlet. She is Alex Winley. He is Austin Roblard. I am Ian Heston. Guys, it is an international break, but that does not mean that there isn't plenty to talk about. A playoff race, obviously the international break, and some transfer rumors already getting talked about. So let's get right into it, where the playoffs stand as of this recording, which, we won't have games, at least in the Eastern Conference this weekend. Inter Miami holding that seventh and final playoff spot in the Eastern Conference, 3 points behind Orlando and Cincinnati, and just ahead of Columbus, also owning the tiebreaker with Columbus with 3 games to play with all of those teams. So, guys, let's just start there. A big win for Inter Miami, a big 2 wins last week to be able in a double game week to put themselves in that situation and jump up the standings. Let's sort of handicap this race with a couple to play. Right now, we're looking at Toronto and then the double game week of home Orlando, home Montreal. Of that, where do we see opportunities for success? Where do we see opportunities to be worried about that you're going to need to get points? And how does the schedule look for you guys moving forward?
Can I start in reverse order?
Sure.
So, the thing is with the Montreal game, I think I said it a couple weeks ago on the pod when we looked at the remaining schedule. I said that this Montreal game, I'm pretty sure they're locking up second place at this point. And if you're going down into that far deep into the season, they know who they're getting ready to play in the playoffs, or at least some of their possible opponents. They're not going to go ahead and risk anything, especially away from home in the Miami heat and humidity on decision day. I just don't know how much they're going to put into that matchup. So for me, I think that could be 3 points. I think that is as sure as guaranteed 3 points as this team should be able to get. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think that that's your best opportunity for 3 points. Then you look at the Orlando game and you say, okay, this is a rivalry, and this is obviously right before the Montreal. I said I'm going in reverse order. It's probably annoying and backwards, but sorry. But with the Orlando game, it's going to be high stakes. It's going to be extremely, extremely high stakes. And I say that just because Orlando, with a couple of results, are fighting for a home playoff spot. I'm looking at the table right now. I see that New York City FC has a game in hand on them, and they have 49 points. Orlando has a game in hand. New York City has 49, and Orlando has 45. So with a win or a couple wins down the stretch for Orlando with 3 games to go, they can jump New York City and get a home playoff game against that 5 seed, which would probably end up being either New York City or even an FC Cincinnati if New York City keep up a poor run of form as they've been showing as of late. So there's a lot to be said for that game as well. I think it's going to be extremely high stakes for both teams. It's obviously a rivalry game. Miami hasn't played them at home in a very long time. We had the 2 games away, one in the Open Cup where we lost on penalties, and the other one away from home earlier this season. So there's a lot to play for in that game. And then for the Toronto game on the road, listen, this team took care of business at home. This team completely took care of business at home against Toronto. And I think that this is a game you go on the road. You need to ride the momentum. I know there's been a long break, which has been annoying. So they don't play again. I think that game was on the 30th, if I'm not mistaken. And they hadn't played since Saturday, which was, the 19th, I think? So it's a long stretch in between games, and the last time that happened, we were a little upset at the Chicago result with that long stretch in between games. It looked like they had 10 or 11 days to prepare, and they didn't come out fully ready, and that was a game on the road. And now I look at this one, I say, look, you've got 10, 11 days to prepare. You've got a couple players back from injury, Damian Lowe, Leonardo Campana, and that obviously helped in this DC United match. So I'm hoping that they are ready for this Toronto one. I think that you can pick up at least 6 points here, and I think that if you do pick up 6 points here, in this stretch of 3 games, then you're pretty much sure for the playoffs. I think, Ian, you were talking about it with the IMCF burner account, talking about how they could clinch playoffs within 2 games, not even just 3. So there's ways for them to do that too. So it's going to be extremely interesting down the stretch. But I'm very curious to see how this team rallies behind each other to get results on the road and at home in front of their fans.
We'll get into that, into the scenarios in just a sec. But Alex, I wanted you to have the word on how you sort of handicap this race and with the 3 games remaining, which the important ones are before we get into scenarios.
Yeah, I think the Toronto match will be a tricky one, like Austin said. Last time Miami had a 10-plus day layoff, they came back against Chicago, and was it Chicago or some team? Yes, but and they didn't play well. So yeah, it's a little worrying for Miami as far as trends go. But at the same time, Pozuelo's there, Campana's back, so they should be okay. Plus Toronto are eliminated from the playoffs, so maybe they won't have anything to play for. I don't know. The one tricky game, I think Montreal will be set and not really play as hard. Will be Orlando. I think the fandom and the team as a whole, they're going to try to derail Miami's playoff push. So they're definitely going to go to and try to get a win against Miami. So I think that could be a stumbling block. But yeah, it's a rivalry game, but it's a Wednesday night, and the crowd may not be as packed. We don't know, but we'll see, because I think that will probably be the one game that Miami has to look out for.
So the scenarios, it is possible for Miami to clinch before decision day. There's only really two scenarios. They cannot over Orlando, just with the way things are set out. But what they can do is in regards to Cincinnati and regards to the Crew. I think that we all are in agreement that it would be a long shot to see Atlanta or Charlotte mount any chance in this. Charlotte being the one with more games in hand, with the more up, and the wins being the team that probably presents more of a threat. Atlanta would need a ton of help, and the likelihood of that happening is very small. As we go down the list, as you mentioned, Alex, Chicago, Toronto, and DC already eliminated in that contention. And then when you look up, those top four really look to be solidified. 7 points now, NYCFC clear of the playoff line with just a couple of games to play. So knowing that this is the block, the scenarios are for Inter Miami, if they were to win at Toronto, if Crew were to lose their weekend game, and Inter Miami then went and beat Orlando, they would be 3 points ahead with one game to play, owning the wins tiebreaker. Inter Miami would clinch a spot above the Crew. The other scenario is that the game in hand, the difference here is the game in hand for Cincinnati is the week before. So Cincinnati actually plays next Tuesday at Seattle. If Cincinnati were to lose that game, they have to lose. They can't draw. If they were to lose that game and Inter Miami and then lose the weekend, and so losing twice, Inter Miami winning twice, that would also have the same scenario where they're up 3 points on them, one game to play, owning the tiebreaker. So those are sort of the ways that you're looking out for this. You need 2 for Cincinnati. You need 1 for Columbus. When we look at that schedule, and I want to pull it up so that we can understand, which one do you see more likely is happening? For Cincinnati, it's at Seattle, home to Chicago, and at DC. That'll be a little bit, in my opinion, more favorable. For the Crew, they're home to the Red Bulls, at Charlotte, and at Orlando on decision day. Now, that at Orlando game will come into play huge because one of those teams is going to have to drop points. But looking at that, does that sway you one way or the other in terms of Cincinnati or Columbus?
I mean, I think Cincinnati being on the road at Seattle during all of this is extremely likable for Miami. However, we've seen how the Crew have played. I know they don't necessarily lose games, but at the same time, they aren't winning much either. I think how many wins do they have? 9 wins on the year, and you look at that and say, look, if they're needing to get results, you can't really count on them for that. So
I think they have one win in their past 14. One win,
which is crazy.
They've drawn the whole way, yeah. And that one win team against Inter Miami.
The 1-0. The 1-0 win, yeah. It's crazy. But when you see a team get in desperation mode and they're going to start needing wins down the stretch here, that might also be favorable for Miami for them to drop points. So I think it goes both ways, but I'm really liking the fact that Cincinnati has to go away to Seattle. They've had a lot of different Western Conference games here down the stretch, which has been really interesting. I don't know why the scheduling ended up being that way, but I'm looking at both and saying, you know what? If Miami can hold their own and get these 6 points, I really think that it's very, very, very possible for them to be in a playoff spot by the time Montreal comes to visit them on decision day.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking at actually I'll go with the Crew. I think looking at their schedule, Red Bulls away, Red Bulls at home, Charlotte away and Orlando away. Charlotte, they have a really good home form. So I think that Charlotte could be up for it and get a win there. And Orlando, like we said earlier, they're going to be fighting for a home playoff spot. So I think that they're going to go for it as well. So, and the Red Bulls at home, the Red Bulls are a very good side. The Crew, like besides that Miami one, they haven't been playing the best this season. So they could very well lose or draw that one too. So I think those are the games that Miami fans should focus on, especially since the Crew are, the direct rivals for that last playoff spot. I think, maybe Miami can get sixth, but, I think Cincinnati are just in really good form, and I can't see them really dropping points. As well as Atlanta, I know it's a bit of a stretch for them, but, maybe if they win 2 of their last games and Miami really completely, catastrophically just fails to win anything, maybe they can sneak through. But I think I'd focus on the Crew more than anything. They're in poor form. They're playing the Red Bulls at home. That could be an easy win for the Red Bulls, and then they play Orlando and Charlotte away. So, and those are 2 teams that can do the job and get wins at home. So I'd focus on that. I think Cincinnati will get their job done, and Miami will probably sneak that last spot.
Which is the Orlando Columbus game on decision day?
Yeah.
See, so if Miami win that Orlando match, Orlando's going to be really chomping at the bit to get a win, like 100% at home in front of their fans on decision day, because they have a huge possibility of clinching home playoff spot, and if they can do that on decision day, darn well they're going to go for it to keep it PG here. So.
But here's really the problem that the Crew find themselves in, is that the best team that they're going to face is the one upcoming, home against Red Bulls. That's going to be even though it's at home, it's also their last home game, though. That's going to be difficult to pull out points from. So let's just hypothetically give them a draw there. Then they have to go at Charlotte, who is one of the better home teams in all of MLS. So for however dismal they're very similar to Inter Miami if they had been able to pull off some road results. They have a ton of wins. I think they have the most wins at home of any team that isn't in a playoff position in all of MLS. So they have been proven to be very good at home in Charlotte. So if you only get 1 point from those 2, now all of a sudden you have to get a win. I know that I'm giving hypotheticals here. You have to get a win at Orlando on decision day. If you're able to pull that off, right? If you're able to pull that off and Miami beat Orlando, now all of a sudden Orlando's the team in the mix because Orlando can only get up to 48. That's why that last game is so important, because all of a sudden one of those teams having to drop points is going to affect everything around it, which to me winds up being very interesting. The numbers, the odds makers do really like Inter Miami at this point. That win over DC really flipped things in their favor. They were prior to the Columbus game, even down into the low 20s, high teens as a playoff possibility. Now up to 59%. The cutoff line projected at 46 points. So they really think that they only need 4 points out of these 3 games. That being said, if that winds up being the case, and 45, 46 points generally in MLS is the cutoff line for a playoff position year to year as we go through. Phil has talked about each game as being the cup final, right? We've joked about this a bunch, that every single game is a cup final, whether you win, lose, or draw. Somehow, if it's a cup final, normally you win something. If it's a cup final, you lose. Normally you're out of the competition. Somehow we've had a million cup finals in a row with over a 10-game stretch that a team has gone 5 wins, 2 draws, and 3 losses. Explain that one to me. But all joking aside, would you point to any one of the 3 as a cup final, or in totality here, this stretch? At this point, it's just get the points. It doesn't matter where it comes from.
I mean, I think if you lose against Toronto away from home, your next 2 games are quote unquote cup finals. But if you beat Toronto, then I think that the Montreal game is more of a cup final than anything. I don't know. I would say, and now it's kind of looking like the Toronto game's a cup final because that one seems to have all the results tied into it. So I'm not sure. I wouldn't say that any of them are necessarily a cup final or must win games. I mean, I would say you have to win 2 of the 3 and you're comfortable. So I guess I can't really say something's a cup final. So if they win the first one, then I guess the next one's a cup final. I'm not really sure. I think if they do drop points, though, away from home, there's going to be a lot of pressure riding on those last 2 games. Luckily, they're at home for both of them. They do come in quick succession. They're in the same week, and one of them's against your biggest rivals who's fighting for something. Like we said, Montreal's not. But, I mean, cup final this, cup final that. Just win 2 of the 3 games. That's how you have to see it. See it like a World Cup group stage or something like that. Don't necessarily see it as a cup final. See it as we need to compete in this certain way over the length of these 3 games. That's kind of how I'm seeing it. I've heard, I don't remember who he was talking to or what the interview was, but like viewing this right now, it kind of reminds me of a World Cup. And Greg Berhalter talked about it on some interview, and he was saying, we're not really going into the World Cup playing one tournament. You're playing 2 tournaments. You're playing the group stage tournament. You're playing 3 games there. And then if you get past that tournament, then you go to the knockouts. And it's a completely different ball game. I see that in the same way right now. There's 3 games down the stretch Miami need to prepare for. You have 11 days to come up with a game plan over that week. I think it's a 9-day stretch of 3 games. If you can somehow manage the results, then you're going to go on to a completely different tournament. So I think that they need to tackle these 3 games all together and use the fact that they have their last 2 at home to their advantage. That's kind of how I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Miami can afford to drop any games, really. I think it would be, preferred if they win all of their games. But I think I'm
more worried about to win all of our games.
Yeah, right? I mean, oh, God. I just, you're not going to count on any of these teams that are fighting right now to win all of their games. There's just no way it's going to happen. It's going to cause for drama.
There's a lot of permutations here. And the point being, I mean, they cannot mathematically be eliminated prior to decision day unless they only get 1 point combined from Toronto, or I guess 2 points combined from Toronto and Orlando. That's the only way they can be eliminated prior to decision day, is that they would need to get 2 points or less, and Columbus would win both games. Then you could theoretically be eliminated before decision day. Is there any
which
fear
I don't see happening? I think.
Right. Is there any fear with the extended time off and how they have not looked good after international breaks? Do you have, especially on the road after international breaks, do you have concern there?
Yeah, I do. I think, Miami are a team that thrives off the chaos. I know that Neville, earlier in the season when their schedule was super packed, I know they were complaining about fixture congestion, but I think that's when they played some of their best soccer, is when they could just bunker down and focus on that. But, there is some worries there, especially this Toronto side. They do have quality up top, so it could be, a tricky game. But, if it's anything like last year's game with that Christian McCoon penalty, I think at this point Miami will take it. So,
Austin, do you have the same fear?
Yeah, I mean, I do, because you just look back at that Chicago, the Columbus to Chicago drop off, and it was just like the Chicago in at that time. We were looking at it and we were saying this is a must-win game against a poor side. You have 11 days off. You're getting Pozuelo back, and they put up one of the worst performances on the year. So, like, I do have that fear, but I think that as the pressure builds, as Alex was saying, this team has been thriving in chaos, and it's going to get chaotic and more chaotic and more chaotic. And I think this Toronto game has all the tools to be super chaotic, and I think that they could thrive under that. So, yeah, I do have the fear, but at the same time, this team over the last 2 games has given me, dare I say, a little bit of trust in them to pull out some results. So it's interesting.
It is the international break, and it was an exciting time at the facility this past week. The Argentina national team training at Inter Miami's practice facility. The first chance to, we'll laugh at this come next year, but the first chance to see Leo Messi in an Inter Miami building, which was, will make a certain part of the fan base very excited to see that. But it was very great. Gonzalo got to see a lot of old friends, and the team posted a nice video with that. International duties for the U.S. men's national team, going and playing Japan early in the morning, and 8:26 kickoff in the morning in Germany. That way both them and Japanese fans can enjoy that before they play Saudi Arabia as well. the tune-up for the World Cup. These are the last ones as a tune-up for the World Cup in a group for the United States that will include England, Wales, and Iran. So let's start with the U.S. men's national team, and then if we want to go, kick it around the globe a little, we can. But for the U.S. men's national team, is there is it Berhalter's selection? He went kind of chalk in terms of who he picked for the camp, and I would expect pretty much everybody, barring some, there's some guys that are coming in and out of injuries there that could, Anthony Robinson, for example. But I think that this is sort of the lineup that we're going to see, and what he trots out there, I don't see much difference from what he's going to take to Qatar with him in a couple months. Guys, it's 60 days from right now that the U.S. men's national team will kick off against Gareth Bale and them boys from Wales. So not too far away. And what do you think we can learn from the U.S. men's national team in these two matches?
You can learn that Berhalter should have called up Jordan Pifak.
Oh, yeah.
I think
you were going to.
I'm very upset. I love that Josh Sargent there. He's been thriving in the championship. I get it. And I was a big Sargent guy for a little bit, but then he kind of just got turned into like a defensive winger for Norwich because of Timo Pukki, and it just turned into it wasn't pleasing to watch. But now that Pukki's been injured, Norwich has been relying on Sargent, and he's scoring some goals and getting some assists, so it looks good. But then you look at Union Berlin at the top of the Bundesliga, and who's their striker? Oh, Pifak. Okay, so he's scoring goals and he's getting assists. Why isn't this guy in the team? Why is Ricardo Pepi in the team? I know he scored a goal on the weekend, but is this just a whole system thing? Sure, that's fine. Another player two players I think missed out, unfortunately. I think one was talked about, one wasn't. Tim Ream from Fulham, Anthony Robinson's partner, somebody that you could have there and be extremely confident with in that partnership on the left side of the defense. I know that Berhalter says that he tries to play a high line and Tim Ream's not fit for that. Blah, blah, blah system. I get it. That's fine. But one that I don't necessarily like that missed out is another center back in Mark Mckenzie. I think Mark Mckenzie has a real shot at being a good center back for the U.S. men's national team. He's been playing really well in his domestic competition, and I think that he should have gotten a chance. But at the same time, we know that there is going to be guys like Walker Zimmerman and Aaron Long all the time, and Walker Zimmerman is probably going to be a starter next to Chris Richards. That's kind of what I'm thinking, but I'm not 100% sure right now. I do like to
get that. CCV is going to get.
You think?
Yeah, I think that he's.
I don't know.
The way that he's playing Champions League soccer. I mean, I think that CCV is the guy. They finally got away from Spurs, so he's actually playing now.
So he's actually playing, right? But yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I like that Sam Vines got called back up for the first time in a while. Joe Scally, too, has been really good for Mönchengladbach. Well, he's just been consistent for Mönchengladbach for a long time. I think it'll be interesting to see if Johnny Cardoso gets minutes filling in for Yunus Musa as well, that midfield, which kind of seems solidified. For the most part, we kind of know what's going to happen there. Without Yunus Musa, we might see a little bit of a Brendan Aronson in an 8 role or a Gio Reyna in an 8 role, and I think that could be interesting too. So it'll be extremely telling to see what Berhalter does. It'll be telling to see what his backup plans are, because I don't think he's getting his full lineup without Yunus Musa there. I think he has to be a starter. He's just that talented. So to see what other options he tries to throw in is going to be interesting. And the last thing I want to note, Zach Steffen not being on the roster is a lot. I'm not advocating for Zach Steffen to be on the roster. I don't think he's been playing well by any means. So looking at, Matt Turner, Sean Johnson, who deserves it, who had played really well for New York City for a long time, and Ethan Horvath, but Sean Johnson's the only one getting really good minutes. Matt Turner hasn't really played anything for Arsenal. Zach Steffen is playing, but he's not playing well. So it's an interesting situation with the goalkeepers, just like it is the strikers, who it's probably going to go to Jesus Ferreira, and I wouldn't be upset with that. But it's an interesting situation at the front of the pitch and at the back of the pitch. And, there's always going to be controversy when it comes to Greg Berhalter and his selections and his team sheets, but that's how it is with any national team, right?
Alex, 8 MLS players, 8 players in the selection. Do you see that as a lot, too much, too little, or a constant evolution of the state of U.S. soccer to have that? Or is that, I guess just right?
It's just right. I think with going off Austin's points, I think Berhalter has a specific way he wants to play, and he'll just call up the players that he wants that he knows can do it. And I really don't think it's based on form. Genuinely, I think he has his guys that he likes, to put in this 4-3 that they play, and he'll stick to it. That's, I think, part of the reason why P-Falk hasn't been called up despite his really good form is that I think he just prefers, the Jesus Ferreiras, the Pepis, Josh Sargents of the world compared to, maybe a striker that's in form. And it's unfortunate, but, that's, international soccer. Sometimes coaches will freeze out a player just because, they don't do what, that anything that specifically that they want to. So, I think there's still a lot of time with this roster to evolve. And this upcoming game tomorrow, I think will be super interesting against Japan. It could expose people because Japan are a really technically good team and they play really good soccer. So, it'll be interesting to see. I do think that as far as Yunus Musa goes, I think Aronson will start in that role instead of Gio Reyna. I know Reyna's probably, although he did play, he's, coming off an injury and maybe getting his minutes back a little bit slower. So maybe you throw Reyna on in the second half. As far as the center back situation goes, it's really unfortunate John Brooks has just been frozen out of the team because I just would have started him realistically. But any player really next is Walker Zimmerman, because I do think Zimmerman's going to be that starter heading into Qatar. It's just who's going to partner him really realistically. Chris Richards, CCV, these are the games that Berhalter makes those decisions. So I know that we all want Yedlin to go to Qatar as well. So I think maybe his spot is locked in too. So. Yeah, just a lot of interesting battles all over the pitch right now for the U.S. And, let's see what Greg decides to do because, it's just there's just going to be some players missing out, some really talented players. And
it's a good problem to
they've
have.
got 2026.
Right? And you mentioned DeAndre. I think that when DeAndre sort of has like this sweet spot there where I don't know if you can drop him, and yet I don't know if like – he's sort of like right there in that reserve right back role. Like he is there, like break glass in case of emergency right now. Honestly, would be nice.
On some teams, he could start. I think depending on some teams, like I don't know if you guys disagree, but Dest is really good going forward. But tracking back, he can be a little suspect. But with Yedlin, he's got that recovery pace to just get back in position. So I can see against. I don't know. Wales,
Dest
I guess.
Also hasn't been playing that much for AC Milan since transferring over. And so he's been locked out there as well.
I managed to watch him a couple of days ago with Milan, and he came on as a winger. So he wasn't even playing as a fullback. He came on as a winger instead of replacing David Calabria. So, it's a tricky situation with that. But
would the U.S. men's benefit from a 5 at the back?
I don't think Berhalter.
I don't think Berhalter would do it if you had a different manager, sure. But like Yedlin and Anthony Robinson,
healthy, yeah.
They're
Yedlin
and Robinson, right? But if you're starting Serginho Dest up there, who is extremely good at going forward, of course, and not necessarily great at recovery. If you have a little bit more cover for him, I think it could help. But I don't know. That's just something that I would explore with manager after.
He won't change it though.
He won't. No. He's not going to. I'm not saying he's going to. I'm not saying he's going to. But I think it's an option that should be. Like I could see a 5-2-3 with this team. Like I could see any of the three center backs. I can see any of the three center backs that he wants. I can see Dest and Anthony Robinson, McKenzie and Adams in the middle of the park, and then up front you put whatever you can do. Jesus Ferreira, of course, at striker, Pulisic on the left, and then Timothy Weah or Brendan Aronson or anybody. He probably would put Paul Arriola, anybody on the right side. I think that could work, but I wouldn't want to see Paul Arriola or Jordan Morris, by the way. But anyway, that's a whole different discussion. I think that's a possibility for this team. It looks like it fits, but for right now, Berhalter is going to play this 4 at the back, this high line, and that's what he wants to do. But going forward with the amount of talent that's going to be on this roster, depending how long Berhalter lasts, I think that there could be a switch in style for the U.S. men's rather shortly.
Okay. Can you elaborate off of that? What do you?
Yeah.
I just think I think that with the talent that's coming up and what I see right now in the talent pool, Berhalter, in my opinion, doesn't last too much farther than the 2022 World Cup. I don't think that he's going to be the men's manager going into 2026. I don't see it. But if he is, then kudos.
Manager, though.
Right, but I'm saying with somebody else that they decide to bring in,
Jesse Marsh.
It should be explored to use the talent pool into their best abilities. If Sergiño Dest is playing as a right wing back, if Anthony Robinson, who is also extremely fast and able to get forward and plays on a lot of crosses for Fulham, you have extremely good center mids, Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie, who can control the middle of the field really, really, really well. You can sub in players like Musa. You can sub in players like Luca De La Torre in the middle of the field. I mean, there is a lot of quality midfielders who I can see in a double pivot playing alongside wingbacks. And going forward, I think you have a ton of depth at the right wing and left wing position, or just your front three in general. You've got, I didn't even mention Gio Reyna when I was talking about the front three. There's another player that you can throw in there, which I like to see Reyna centrally, but as a right wing, that could work. I think when you figure out the striker situation, someone like Pifok, someone like Sargent, someone like Ferreira, even someone like Pepe. Would be great in the air in the middle of the box with a 3-4-3 and going forward and loading in crosses from the wingers. I think that is extremely helpful. So for me, if I'm the men's national team manager, I'm probably going to look for a 3-4-3 in my personal opinion, but I'm not a manager and I don't have my licenses. So there's that. I just think that going forward, moving, we'll get there. Moving away from Berhalter could mean a switch in style for the U.S. men's national team, and I think that it would actually work to their benefit going into the next World Cup. That's how I see it. That was just my envision, how I vision this talent that they have right now working on the field in the best possible way, getting the most out of their players. I think it's a 3-4-3.
Awesome.
So I'm gonna add on to that. If they switch to that, Pulisic can cut inside a lot more comfortably without sacrificing, the width on that left side, and you can have Jedi overlap, and Pulisic can get the ball in the half channels where he's really good at and turn. And if they're playing a 3-4-3, but yeah, that'll never happen. So
we're getting you ready for the 2030 World Cup here on the Heron. Austin will be manager before we know it. Let's close up with some news and notes. Some good news, actually. Very good news of Bryce Duke being named to MLS's 22 under 22, getting right in there, and I think well deserved for it. They when you look at up and down that list, pretty much everybody on that list is a regular starter. I don't know if Bryce right now rises to that or considers that simply because of where he's positionally. He's more of a rotational player. But to see the company that he keeps, it really for me just goes to show that the minutes that he plays, I think he does have one of the highest in that group of attacking midfielders in that 22 under 22. I think he might have the most minutes played in MLS this season, or up there with it. But just goes to show what a great season he has, and hopefully what the future is for him here with the club.
Yep. Yeah. Bryce has been really great. I was glad to see him get a shout out there. Hopefully more younger players can come through and get on these lists next season. Noah Allen, Felipe Valencia, Edison Escona, guys like that just coming through, maybe getting a foothold in the first team and showing that Miami are quite good at developing young players. So even though they didn't develop Bryce, but they gave him a platform to go and play comfortably and further his skills and himself as a player. So yeah, kudos to Bryce. Congratulations. And yeah, I think it'll be, it's a really good shout for him and the team as a whole.
I think that he's made a ton of contributions for this team. I mean, especially going back to the Campana hat trick where he helped out with the assist and he had scored a late goal in another game. I think that he deserves a lot of credit. This credit that he's getting is deserved. I could even see him being higher on the list. I mean, I look at some of the players and I know
Yeah.
There were some players that I looked at. I'm like, all right, I think that they're basing this off of potential a little bit, or like your men's national team call ups. Not going to say any names, but Cade Cowell.
Oh my
like
god!
There's players like that I looked at and I was like, okay, yes, I see why they're there, but also shouldn't be above Bryce Duke because he's made real contributions to a possible playoff side, but. Whatever. He deserves the recognition. Numbers don't really matter. He got on the list. He's getting it, and I think it's fully deserved, yeah.
Let's go from one end of the age spectrum to the other, and transfer rumors abound for a Barcelona legend in Sergio Busquets, the 34-year-old, planning on finishing this year, according to reports out of Spain, to finish this year with Barcelona, and then at the end of his contract, June 2023, a potential free transfer to Inter Miami, being named as one of the MLS clubs at the top of his list. Now, the report did go, I think it was in Sport over in, it was the first to come out with it, a Spanish newspaper over there. But the report said that he is open to an MLS move like writ large, and Inter Miami would be his preferred destination. So I guess that lends itself to a lot of components. One, it would be a free transfer because he's out of contract in June. Two, you would need to move levers of mechanism. We're talking allocation money. We're talking, allocation order rankings, all the stuff that they needed to do to get. It would be a different mechanism from DeAndre Yedlin because he's a U.S. men's national team player, but they would need to move things around in order to get him. So with that knowledge heading in, would getting Busquets be worth it? You're talking a 34-year-old. Let's just go pros and cons. A 34-year-old, probably going to be on a higher salary, probably a TAM salary, with needing to move things in order to get him. Probably allocation money being the first, as opposed to at one time one of the best defensive midfielders in the world, comes with the name recognition, comes with, the appeal factor of Barcelona, comes with creating everything that goes along with being a big club with the big names, and if he can help out. I guess that's where I start pros versus cons, which outweighs which.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I wouldn't, honestly, I feel like if they were to sign Busquets, if this happens, I think it's basically a soft launch for his retirement. Honestly, he's still good enough to play in Europe. He could play in Italy where his play style will fit well. He can go to another La Liga team, but that's never going to happen. He's a Barca for life first. So Premier League, maybe, I don't know, but going to Inter Miami, I think it's, he's still good enough to play in Europe. So first, I don't know why he's considering coming to MLS. Number two, I don't know. I'm just pumping the brakes on older players, especially in MLS. People underestimate the amount of travel and physicality that this league has, and I know people are going to say, well, he played in La Liga and he's a DM, so he's physical. Well, no, that's he's not a pure destroyer as a defensive midfielder. He's a deep line playmaker, essentially, who has really good ball progression and he can carry the ball up the field quite well. So he's not like a Gregory type where he's gonna block everything, and which, I mean, obviously Busquets can do, but they're two different types of players. So personally, I would just this move screams like we need more tickets and bodies and seats. Really, honestly, I think he'll be a good addition to the squad, but I think it's more of a we need more fans in the stand, so let's get a player that could help the team and has name recognition and, play him instead of maybe going after, a TAM player who's younger, playing in Europe, who has a higher upside, like a Pozuelo when Toronto acquired Pozuelo, a guy like that, in the sense of, there are players that you can use advanced stats and analytical data to fit what exactly you want to do that doesn't have the name recognition. But with Miami, I don't think they're going to go after that. So if they have a chance to get a Busquets, I do think they're going to do it. I personally wouldn't do it. And, if he comes, then Mata, Gregory, if Pozuelo resigns, one of them are going to get dropped. So, I think it depends on his role, really, honestly, more than anything.
Could you see like a what do they call it? Like a 4-4-2 diamond with Busquets in the hole, Gregory and Malta on the sides, and then you have Pozuelo up front, and you run a Campana Higuain type thing. You take out a lot of pace in the roster, but that's kind of the only. Like, I don't know what it would bring necessarily.
How old and slow are you going to get there?
That's why. Oh, Higuain's probably not going to be on the roster next year. If we're being totally honest, we don't really know, of course, because he's had quite the resurgence. If we're really looking at it, I mean, he's been great. But I don't know. I just don't know what exactly the idea is, and if I'm looking at it from an outside perspective and an inside perspective, I get PTSD to a certain World Cup winner who was brought in a little while ago and is not on the roster anymore. That's kind of what I'm looking at, and
in a similar position,
obviously. In a similar position, exactly. But Busquets, of course, the caliber of Busquets is high above that certain player that we're talking about. I mean, by a lot. I mean, we're not just talking about one of the best defensive players in the world at the time he was in his prime. Like, looking at all time, he is a certified name when you're thinking about defensive midfielders in at least this century. He's been outstanding for one of the best clubs in the world. His technical ability on the ball, Alex was talking about his ball progression and the way it's just so pure. It's pure. He is a pure footballer, and I can't give enough credit to Sergio Busquets. Not that my credit to him matters anyway, but it doesn't make sense, in my opinion. It really doesn't make sense, and I think that Alex is right and hit it right on the nose. It's more of a marketing thing than anything, and I understand that that's part of the strategy. Football is not always just about the sport; it's about the business side as well, and I could see that would be beneficial in that way. But for on the pitch, I mean, they've tried it before, and it really didn't work. And I think that with what you've built and with who you've brought in, the Pozuelos, the Gregories, the Motas, why do you need to change any of that?
I'll add one more to it. I think that it's a better move for the player than it is for the club, and in that regard,
okay.
I think that the player gets more out of it than the club, and that's fine. I mean, that's nothing against him or anybody like that. That's totally fine. I just think that who wants who. I think Busquets wants to be in Miami more than Miami needs to go out and get a Busquets, and that for me is where I would start and end the conversation. Guys, before we get out of here, a player that currently is under contract with Inter Miami, also getting a lot of transfer talk this past week. A report from MLS Transfers, so give this with a grain of salt, but saying that should Inter Miami want to move on from Robbie Robinson in the offseason, there are several MLS clubs that would be willing to trade for him. And so that, brings in a lot of conversation of, does Inter Miami want to move on from Robbie? We know the history with injuries. It's been very difficult. He's been training away from the team for much of the year. And then B, what compensation are you talking getting back from him? Remember, first overall pick, all the controversy between was it going to be him or DK? Everything, the first pick in franchise history. Having to deal with everything with the bubble and COVID and right when all of this started. So Robbie's been through a lot in a very short career. Still is a former Herman Award Trophy winner, still is young. That is the equivalent of the Heisman for college soccer. And still, I think, is a very talented player. The question for me, and I guess I'll see if you guys agree here, is the price needs to match it. And I know that people are going to say, well, he hasn't scored enough. He hasn't played enough. He hasn't simply had the minutes on the field. I understand that. But in the totality of the situation, I know I've been a big Robbie defender. So you can throw all the heat my way. I still see when he is healthy, I still see why you picked him first overall. I still understand it. And so I'm not giving him up for nothing. If I have the player under contract, then I mean, we're talking like 100,000, 200,000 TAM at least, right? Like I want something for him. I understand from a business standpoint that moves happen. So if that were to be the case, then I understand it. But I don't think that this is a situation where, we just got to cut our losses that some people are framing it as. I still think that there is value there that you need to approach it with.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think To an extent, anyway. I think that not only has it just not worked in 3 years for Robbie, unfortunately, due to injuries and how he had been used in certain ways, but for me, I think for Robbie, just like Lewis Morgan, just like Julian Carranza, it might be best for him to go on and find something else and look, and the club should look to explore those options for themselves to, one, get value back. Because I think $200,000 in general, $200,000 in general allocation money is a fair number. Is a fair number for Robbie Robinson for all the accolades he has up to this point. I would even be okay with 150. I mean, I would be okay with that in a second round, something. I mean, just get something out of it. Let the player move on. It hasn't worked. It hasn't gelled. And I think it's literally as simple as that. There's no way, in my opinion, that he's in the plans going forward right now with the wingers they've brought in, the attackers they've brought in, the way they've been trying to play their game. And if Phil Neville is here after the season, then I don't see Robbie being on this roster. I do see them going out and acquiring some kind of money or draft picks or some international roster spots. I don't know what it is in MLS, but they will get something for Robbie Robinson. And I think it's okay to let go of all the sentiments of being your first ever pick and all of these kinds of things and just saying, you know what, it hasn't worked. Let's, not mix anything else other than this is football, this is soccer, this is a business as well. And we need to get something for a guy that is not usable in South Florida, but that can be usable elsewhere. Like, you don't want to ruin this guy's career and have him down here on this rookie deal and waste his talent for himself. I don't think he's going to want that either. You don't want Lewis Morgan to still be here as a defensive winger. You don't want Julian Carranza to be the backup on the bench to Higuain.
See, so
that's why they moved on.
Right, you're bringing these guys up, and I understand that. But I guess the case study that I would bring up more in terms of all this would be Pellegrini. If you're going to bring up anything, like, I think that would be the closer situation of not really playing with the club, being away from the club, and then going to another team. Pellegrini, you got absolutely nothing for. And I don't think you can enter into a situation like that with Robbie. That's my point, is that I'm looking at,
okay.
You got 1.75 mil for Lewis and Carranza combined. You got zero for Pellegrini. So, like, I look at it more of that situation, that you can't just say, oh, we terminate the contract, and then he's signing with Houston Dynamo a week later, right?
I mean, yeah. Are you happy with $150,000-$200,000 though in general allocation money? I am.
No, I'm not bargain bidding. He can be on my roster. I'm not bargain bidding with him. Alex, I don't know if you agree or where you lie.
Really?
I don't know. I think we've heard Neville talk about Robbie and just wanting him to do more on the field, really, and he really pushes him a lot. But I think with the signing of Coco Jean and Robert Taylor's here, Ariel Lassiter, I think as far as the wingers go, Emerson, even Ascona, if he gets back in the fold, I think as the wingers go, I think that is set. I don't think Robbie's going to get ahead of Taylor with his flexibility, Lassiter with his pace, although Robbie is really speedy. I do think maybe his playing style will change a bit after this specific injury, which is unfortunate. But as far as wingers go, I cannot see him getting into the team. As far as the central forward goes, even if when Higuain leaves, there's Campana there. If when he resigns, who is he's on 10 goals this season, maybe 11. I have to double check. He's scoring up. He's lighting up the league. I just don't see where Robbie goes. And I even said this a couple months back that Miami should have just maybe trade him to Charlotte. That's his. He's from the Carolina area and. In the Charlotte play in a style, him and I believe his name is Mckenzie Gaines, another speedy winger. They could, start together and it could probably work out for Charlotte a lot better than it can in Miami. And, he'll be closer to home and it'll be interesting to see if he can regain his form in that way. But I don't know. I do think that there are other MLS teams that want him. He does have a good skill set. He's tall, strong. He's quick. So I do think there are plenty of teams that can use him, and I think Miami could move on from him, and I wouldn't mind the team being, moving him on. I know Robbie, first draft pick and all that, but he, sometimes he just, doesn't work out, like you guys mentioned, Pellegrini, Carranza, Morgan, maybe they'll move him on this off season just to make room for other incoming. So, it depends, but I do see the upside in keeping Robbie, but right now I can't see where he gets into the team really.
Don't forget, in all of this, there is also St. Louis, an expansion team coming into MLS next year, and you're going to have all those same levers again with them being top of the allocation order, them having the ability to pull off moves, and them having more allocation money than anybody. I think St. Louis could be a team that really could come in here and facilitate a lot of this if you're trying to make something happen. A conversation that will continue to be it's interesting as we have it, because Phil had said time and time again, every time it's sort of been brought up, that he doesn't want to have a massive overhaul like he did it last year. As we get these conversations going, not all of them are going to come through, but it is interesting to see where the tactics are lying as we have both a playoff race and it'll never stop heading into the offseason as well. We will wrap here with an international break episode of the Heron Outlet, but we'll be right back here next week with game week as the playoff race he gets even hotter, if it possibly could, as we head down the final stretch. Make sure you follow us on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Like, share, subscribe, rate, review, all the fun stuff for our producer, Andres. He is Austin Roblard. She is Alex Winley, and I am Ian Hess. We'll see you right back here next week.